So in this video, I just want to show you how to do, I guess, a async await version of it. So this is an alternative to the, I guess you would say, the promise. Although what happens is when you do async await, a promise is made in the background for you that you don't see. So you're still doing a promise, which in the end still might be doing an XML HTTP request. You just don't see it happening. But I'm going to show you two methods here. And so when I dropped into doing async await, I might have been on this first method I'm going to show you, and that's probably why I myself ran back to promises. Like, no, thank you. The second example, a little cleaner in that, but it was, JavaScript is constantly evolving. They're adding new stuff. Then the browsers have to get to a level where they all support it, and that sort of thing. But things are taking off because of Vite and Snowpack with these new techniques of, we'll talk about shortly later, something called a module, import statements. Import statements have been around for a while, but people haven't been taken advantage of. And then something broke just last year in the spring with Vite and Snowpack, where they started getting a lot of things done. And it might be a product called ESBuild that can convert regular JavaScript files into modules and make them importable with the import statement. It does that on the fly, so you don't have to change a bunch of code or rewrite it. So that's where things really started picking up in that. So I'm going to show you two methods in that. So I've got my doc here. Basically, what you see is this async word in front of a function, and then you see await. Okay, and so there's a, I wouldn't say it's an unspoken rule, it's a rule, but you don't clobber you over the head on it, and they should, that if you want to await, like wait asynchronously, what it kind of means is that your code at this point is going to be basically parked on the side, waiting for get data to return. But it doesn't tie up your app. Your app leaves at this point, goes off and does its own thing, while this is trying to figure itself out in the background in that. So it may sound weird, but that's how async calls and they work. That, hey, we're going to here kind of divide the program in the classic term, put you on different threads. The interface is going to continue on its own thread. Pulling the data here is going to be on its own thread, so they can kind of do their own thing and sync up later on. And that. Now there's a bunch of missing code just to keep it in view, but async await. So anytime you want to go await, hey, my code needs to kind of like pause and wait for stuff, but release control to the main thread so it can go get its stuff done. But I'm going to be busy here, talking to the server, getting the data. You have to be in something that's asyncing, right? And that. There's a bunch of other code that makes the chart, but basically your code hangs out here until the data comes in and then continues. Before I was getting the data, and on a return I would update the chart. So one thing that changes here is I wouldn't have to call chart.update, because this will kind of like pause and hang out till the data arrives. Right now, I have another function called getData that's going to do a bunch of awaiting, so it has to be inside something that's asyncing as well. Okay, and so this is probably why I like, I'm not sure about this. Promises look cleaner. I'll stick with promises and that kind of concept. So, but then, things change in that. So if I can scroll down here, we'll see how the video capture works today. Right. Main GPU looks busy, so on my other screen, so it's not going to be a pleasant one. There's a different way of doing it, and this would be a more modern way. This should work in almost any browser today. Is that when you reference your script, right? That's normal. Source is normal, but then all of a sudden you go type module. Right, that changes things. So you say, hey, my JavaScript file, even though it doesn't look any different, load it as a module, right? And so one thing that probably happens, we can speculate here, is that loading of your module is done inside an async thing, right? To load it, because they're going to say, well, it could take some time. It could be a really big script, might take some time. We'll load it asynchronously. But then that adds you some benefits in that, well, I'm already inside something that's asyncing, so I don't need to wrap a bunch of functions and have async and do the awaits inside there. I can right at the beginning just go, hey, the first couple of lines here, my my response is await fetch, and then my data is going to be wait for the response to convert it. And so that by waiting on those two lines, right? So this kind of cleans it up. You don't see all this asyncing happening. But then, like, if you don't load it as a module, this is not going to work. So that means you bumping up your JavaScript skills to go, okay, there's regular JavaScript files, and then there's these module things. And the advantage is you probably load it in an async way, and I can start awaiting right at the beginning. So I can just say, hey, look, go fetch the data. And if that works out. Now, the one thing I am missing here that is built into the promise is that catch in case something goes wrong and that sort of thing. I don't really have a try. I don't have anything. Should this be inside a try catch so I catch the error? That would be much better for error handling in that. But I just don't want the code noisy today in that. And so then I come down and do my all chart data with my data sets and my label and that where it goes data as JSON. By the time you get to that line, the data's come in because you're waiting. You wait at the top until it comes in. You wait for the fetch to finish, and then you wait for the text to be converted to JSON. And so since you've already waited, you've got the data, plug it right into the chart. Then I just configure the chart and I make the chart in that. So when you look at that, amount of code, you go, that's pretty clean. I can live with that, right? And so the key is it's not as noisy as the top one. They're both going to do the same thing. Is that this JavaScript file just gets loaded as a regular file, but the bottom one gets loaded as a module. And so most browsers, if they're, hey, it's a module, load the module asynchronously. I'm already inside something that's asyncing. I can go await right away and not have to wrap a bunch of functions in that. So that kind of cleans up that. And so if someone asks me today, how does this compare to a promise? I go, well, it's better. It's not as bad as it used to be. I still don't have my structure error handling, but it's just me adding a try catch and that. So I put a try in, and then I put a catch and write to the console in that. But then that adds some noise to my code. But try catches aren't a bad thing to get comfortable with. Now both these work, we hope, in that. It's going to see, yes, so that should be loaded. And we'll go take a look. I mean, they're just going to work. There's nothing fancy. It's just changing basically. Oh, page cannot be found. I'll fix that and be back. So we'll try that again. Had to fix my index page in that bad link in that. And so there's the bar chart. The only reason it's slow is still having a slight GPU problem in terms of one of them gets really busy and cranks the heat on the CPU, and that slows everything down. And so it's the same chart. Well, all we're doing is we're just changing how we're getting it. Instead of using a promise, we're using these new words in the language called async await. And the second one, right? It's the exact same data, exact same chart, but it is taking advantage of this new concept in JavaScript. Well, newer, it's not this, a few years old, modules, right? But sometimes the language gets updated, and it takes time for people to move and things to get popular. And like I said, it wasn't until about spring last year where Snowpack and Vite took off because they really dug in deep because they were able to make really fast development servers. And it's just based on an import statement that was introduced a long time ago. But some of the big changes would be automatically converting a regular JavaScript file into a module in that. And so I just wanted to show you that. Those are some techniques. It's, again, I'll go with that philosophy of whatever clicks for you. If promises look good, there is an advantage of a promise because the built-in catch, which is nice in that, which we're not seeing being taken. I would have to do that myself with the try-catch block. So the promise is still nice. It's still pretty clean. If I was to make a judgment, I don't like loading it as a regular JavaScript file. I have to do too many asyncs and awaits, and that when it's loaded as a module, that's that's pretty clean. It's pretty short too. I like it. So go get the data. Okay, I got the data. Make all data. Make the chart. Hook the chart to the canvas. Done. And that. And so for me, is the second method right? But then what it means is we're bumping up our JavaScript knowledge and skills to take advantage of modules. You shouldn't have a problem with Safari or Brave or Chrome or Opera. They'll all support a module loading in that. You should be fine. There might be something with Internet Explorer, but most people, it's pretty low. Edge is way more popular. So all the core browsers that people would be using should work in that. And so the thing is for now, I mean, you got to survive. You got to survive the lab and stuff and to do a technique that works for you. But this last one, loading it as a module, and there's that key line in the HTML, right? And it's really easy to forget to add in. It throws an error and then you get reminded, right? Okay, I got to load that as a module. That you have to add this little part here, type module. That's a little heads up for the browser. That's probably where it loads it in the asynchronous fashion. And now you're already, like I said, inside something that's asyncing, so you can immediately start using await. You don't have to, make functions that you call in that. It cleans it up, I think, in terms of readability in that. And trending in a good direction. Again, you're still not going to have the built-in catch that's part of the promise, but I think I said it before. Everything's trade-off, nothing's perfect, and that sort of concept. And so just to, okay, there are some different techniques. JavaScript's been around for a while. Like any language, there'll have been multiple ways to do something over time. And it's seeing, like I said, what in your mind, what clicks or what works. Just be aware, if you want to do the last example, you have to do that part on line 13 where you load the JavaScript file, not as a regular file, but as a module. And it kind of immediately puts you into this like async mode, and you can start doing await and that sort of thing. And so it's just getting a feel for, okay, what works for me, right? I'm still like promises because of the catch, but this last thing of loading as a module, kind of clean. That's not too noisy, right? Throw out all these strange words all over the place and calling lots of different functions to make things happen. I mean, this is all just raw code. None of this is inside a function, and we just kind of go for it. Go get the data, right? Turn it into JSON. Once that's done, we can plug it immediately into our all charts data. Plug that into our configuration for our chart, and then on the last lines there, make the chart kind of concept. Yeah, there's the last lines there. To make the chart, shove it in the canvas with the config information from above in that. So it's just, again, coming up with a technique that you are comfortable with, and you got, basically 3 now. Promise, right? We're not going to do the XHTML TP request because that takes a lot of boilerplate code. You got the promise, you've got the asynchronous JavaScript file or a JavaScript module, which, starts to make things a lot cleaner and smoother in terms of fetching data and getting it for your charts. So we'll wrap it there, and that's all for now.